On August 3, 1492, Christopher Columbus sailed south out of the small harbor at Palos, Spain, and into the Atlantic Ocean. His fleet consisted of 3 ships. The largest and most imposing of them, the Santa Maria, was approximately 90 feet long and had a crew of 40 men. Its sails were emblazoned with symbols of the cross. They signified Columbus's intention to defend the Catholic faith and to carry its teachings wherever he journeyed. The other 2 ships in the fleet, the Nina and the Pinta, were smaller than the Santa Maria. They were ships of the newer Portuguese design called caravels. Each was about 75 feet long and had a crew of about 24 sailors. After leaving Spain, the small fleet sailed south along the coast of Africa. 9 days later, they reached a Spanish port in the Canary Islands. Here they took on extra barrels of water and food, but were delayed nearly 3 weeks while the rudder of the Pinta was repaired. On September 9, 1492, the fleet sailed west past the outermost of the Canary Islands and into the vast uncharted waters of the Atlantic. According to his calculations, Columbus believed that they would reach islands off the coast of Japan in about 10 days. If his calculations were wrong, he and his crews could easily find themselves far from land without food or water. Everyone involved knew that if the winds died, they would really be in trouble. Even with favorable winds out on the ocean, it was difficult for them to know whether they were actually on course or not, because there were no landmarks to guide them. Columbus was an accomplished sailor and possessed a good compass, but like most navigators of the time, he hadn't enough experience using celestial navigation instruments to determine their exact location at sea. To follow his course, Columbus relied instead on what was called dead reckoning. This involved continually measuring the distance, speed, and direction that the ships traveled each day. His main navigational tools, in addition to the compass, were the hourglass, or ampolleta, that was used for measuring time, and the traverse board, or toleta, that was used to keep track of the direction and the distance traveled each hour. Day after day, as the fleet sailed westward, the sailors anxiously scanned the horizon for any sign of land. 10 days passed, then 20, then 30, and still there was nothing but the seemingly endless ocean. On October 7th, Columbus took the advice of the captain of the Pinta and changed course slightly to the south. They now headed in the same direction as the flocks of birds that the sailors had seen flying overhead. Shortly after that, Columbus decided that if no land came into view within 3 days, the fleet would return to Spain. At 10 o'clock on the night of October 11th, Columbus was gazing out across the dark waters when he thought he saw flickering lights, but they soon disappeared from view. However, just 4 hours later, one of the sailors sighted land. When it was light, a landing party headed for shore in a small boat, proudly displaying the flag of Spain and the royal banner of the expedition. Overwhelmed with joy, Columbus believed that he had reached the Indies and that his grand ideas had proved to be correct. Little did he know that the land toward which he was heading was about 9,000 miles from Asia. This was an island in the Bahamas, located about 400 miles southeast of Florida. After coming ashore, Columbus gave thanks to God and claimed the land for Spain, naming it San Salvador, or Holy Savior. Native islanders watched in amazement from the nearby forest, believing that the strange men had come from the sky. These native people were members of the Arawak or Taino tribe, who inhabited many of the Caribbean islands. When Columbus and his men explored the forest, they soon encountered the frightened Taino, whom Columbus assumed were Indians, since he believed he was in the Indies. No one could have known at the time that this first meeting between people of the Old World of Europe and people of the New World of the Americas was the beginning of a dramatic shift in world history. The Taino were a gentle and peaceful people, and Columbus befriended them with simple gifts such as tiny bells, caps, and beads. In the Taino village, Columbus and his men became very interested in the gold jewelry they saw, which they were told came from a nearby island. After spending a few days on San Salvador, Columbus sailed in search of the gold. He took some captured Tainos with him to serve as his guides. In addition to the gold, Columbus also wanted to locate the mainland of Asia as soon as possible. He was carrying a letter from the Spanish monarchs that he was to deliver to the Great Khan, the Emperor of China. Columbus visited a number of islands in the Bahamas, claiming each of them for Spain. The Taino natives they encountered were friendly, but they could not tell the Spaniards exactly where the gold came from. They said Columbus should go to a place they called Colba, or Cuba, and look there. As he sailed along Cuba's lengthy northern coastline, Columbus began to believe that he had reached the Asian mainland. He sent out parties of men to explore inland and was tremendously disappointed when they found no cities, spices, silk, or gold. Columbus continued his search. He sailed toward another large island that he named La Isla Española, or Hispaniola. It was during that voyage that the Pinta became lost in a violent storm and was separated from the other ships. In late December, another fierce storm blew up off the coast of Hispaniola and lasted several days. The crew members did not sleep for 2 nights. Then, during the night of December 24th, 1492, the waters grew calm and the exhausted men fell asleep. A young boy was entrusted with the job of steering the ship. While the crew slept peacefully, the Santa Maria ran aground on a reef that the inexperienced boy had failed to see. At the boy's alarmed shout, Columbus scrambled to the deck and roused his sleeping crew. But the Santa Maria had already begun to sink. They were forced to abandon ship near Cap Haitian on the northern part of today's country of Haiti. In the morning, the local Taino Indians helped the sailors salvage what they could from the wreckage. Columbus was grateful for the Taino's help, and to show his appreciation, he placed a string of beads around the neck of the chief and offered him his assistance if he needed it. Early in January of 1493, Christopher Columbus sailed back to Spain in the Niña. His cargo consisted of a few gold ornaments, some parrots, and captive Taino natives that he planned to present to King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. Columbus left 39 volunteer crewmen on Hispaniola to finish building a fort from the wreckage of the Santa Maria and to search for gold. On the homeward voyage, the Pinta and the Niña were reunited and then separated again in a tremendous storm. On March 15, 1493, the Niña sailed into the Spanish port of Palos, and the Pinta arrived just a few hours later. In Spain, Christopher Columbus was honored as a great national hero for all that he had accomplished. Later that year, he traveled back across the Atlantic with a fleet of 17 ships and 1,000 men to establish the first Spanish colony in the New World and to continue searching for the mainland of Asia. Columbus made 2 more trips to the New World in 1498 and 1502, but he never found the route to Asia that he was looking for. Nevertheless, Christopher Columbus's impact extends far beyond the actual accomplishments of his expeditions. Because by searching for a westward sea route to Asia, he changed commonly held beliefs about the world. His expeditions initiated an incredible series of important historical events. After his voyages, other nations, including Portugal, the Netherlands, France and England also began sending explorers across the Atlantic. Colonization followed exploration, resulting in enormous population changes as immigrants from Europe settled in the colonies, bringing with them their Old World cultural and religious traditions. For the native people of the Americas, the consequences of Columbus's voyages were tragic because they lost their land, became slaves, and died by the millions from European diseases. The historical consequences of Columbus's voyages were tragic also for the millions of Africans who were uprooted and sold as slaves to work in the colonies of the New World. However, for the European colonists, the consequences were generally favorable because most of them increased their landholdings and eventually prospered. So while many revere Christopher Columbus for his persistence, his seamanship, and his discoveries, others criticize him for his role as the founder of the first European colony in the New World, due to the reckless exploitation of people and resources that followed in its wake. But regardless of whether he is admired or scorned, Christopher Columbus was a man who radically changed the course of history.